So Keith, we live? I didn't quite catch what Karen said.
She's just getting it launched, so we're.
Yes.
Oh, we are live right now, so I think we're good to go. We've got.
Okay, well, Commissioner Cook is not here today, our chairman, so as the chair pro tem, I'll go ahead and reconvene the meeting that we recessed yesterday. This is the 2021 Franklin County Budget Workshop. Today is Thursday, October 29th. This is the AM session. Keith, so that I can follow along and focus on the details here, I'm going to ask you to walk us through administratively department by department, and that'll give both commissioners ample opportunity to ask questions. So
Certainly.
Over to you, and I think we start with Public Works.
Yes, Matt Mahoney from Public Works is on the line and I believe ready to go. So Matt, we'll turn it over to you to start with your miscellaneous 152 budget, which is the solid waste and the probation work crew budget. And then maybe if you wouldn't mind just pausing at the end of that if there's any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Keith. As the board knows, the solid waste budget and the probation budget both are funded through grants from the Department of Ecology. This is the second year of a biennial budget. So the only real major change that you'll see in this overall budget, mainly the probation side of it, is in this year, 2020, we received a grant for a new van. That van went to the city of Pasco for their cleanup operations with their probation folks. And so that is not existent in the 2021. So we just removed that revenue and of course the expenditure. So other than that, I'll just pause and ask any questions.
No questions, Matt. This one is one that we live and die by the grant, and the staff that you have that work this program really are kind of at the mercy of what the state gives us in this biennium.
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead and move on to the county roads 150.
All right, I'm going to ask for the board's indulgence. I basically kind of put together some talking notes, so I'll read through this if the board's okay with that, and then I'll be silent for questions. So I'd like to start out. In 2015, we were able to build the county road fund balance to $2,688,872. Since that time, due to levy shifts, traffic policing diversions, charges for services from general departments, natural disasters, and the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen a decline in our fund balance, which included a 20.3% decrease in 2016, 8.3% decrease in 17, a 7% decrease in 2018. Based on our accounting records, we anticipate a 49% decrease for 2019 and the equivalent again for 2020. This could bring our fund balance down to approximately $400,000, which is shown as our total beginning fund balance for the 2021 budget year. For the purposes of adequate cash flow, we analyzed the need for a minimum beginning fund balance of $800,000. This does not include any necessary reserves to cover catastrophic events, which we have analyzed to be an additional $800,000 for a total beginning fund balance of $1.6 million. Without adequate reserves, it's not about postponing work or adjusting schedules based on anticipated receipt of revenues. It's about cutting specific activities like chip seal, crack seal, and gravel road upgrades, all of which require work to be done at a specific time of year. These are all vital preservation activities that we can ill afford to put off another year as we have in 2019 and 2020. Therefore, the board may have to consider turning back grant funds and postponing capital transportation projects because we will not have the required matching funds available, which is currently budgeted at $857,066 for 2021. In my review of the financial statements and federal single audit reports for Franklin County from 2013 to 2018, and of course 2019 is not publicly available, I have noted the following. The average variance between 2013 and 2018 within the general fund's final budget, specifically the beginning fund balance January 1 and the budgetary fund balance December 31st, they were positive 174,000 and 2 million respectively. Please note all the values I'm citing are rounded. The average of the diversions and payments from the county road fund, which includes levy shifts, diversions of motor vehicle fuel tax for traffic policing, and payments for services to the general fund departments between 13 and 18 were 1.1 million. Note the average for 2019 and 2020 is closer to 1.9 million. If we subtracted just the levy shifts and diversions from the county road fund to the general fund in that same period, the average budgetary fund balance December 31st would have still constituted a positive variance of 1.1 million within the general fund. This means the general fund would have had over $1 million more on average at the end of each of those years than they budgeted. It's important to note these numbers do not include the resources within the Franklin County Reserve Fund, as this is a miscellaneous budget located outside of the general fund. For example, page 60 of the 2018 single audit report states, and I quote, at year end, the county held $5,372,982 in fund balance within the current expense and reserve accounts. $3,212,727 above the minimum reserve goal, end quote. Based on this information, I urge the board to consider a 1% increase to the county road levy, take any bank capacity for the county road levy, and limit the amount of any levy shift and or diversion from the county road fund to the general fund. As a final note, the budget that we've submitted for the county road fund does include the 1%. We haven't included any bank capacity and does not account for any levy shifts. And so we have balanced our budget based on that. And even with that, we, at the end of the year, if you go to the expenditures, that is where we can show ending fund balance of 960. So it gives us a chance this year, if all of that occurs, that we can start building this fund back up. So with that, I'll just stand by for any questions.
So Matt, your comments about the reserve didn't make clear whether you regard the beginning fund balance as a cash flow account or as an expenditure account or some combination thereof. And I'm thinking that you would probably acknowledge that your beginning fund balance carries through usually to the end of the year, and what you're referring to is that end of year, which turned into a beginning fund balance, has been declining over time. So what would you say to the question, how do you regard the beginning fund balance? What are those dollars for?
Those dollars specifically for the county road fund are for cash flow. We do a lot of work, as the board knows, in June and July, which means we incur a lot of expenditures right at the same time.
So the amount of money in that beginning fund balance doesn't impact the amount of work you can do. It impacts whether or not you have cash on hand to pay bills until taxes come in.
Yeah, which would be October at that point for us. Okay. Correct.
Have you in any year since you've been with the county? Well, strike that because that's too big a question. In the last several years, have you run short of having enough money to pay bills before taxes came in?
Well, as you recall, Commissioner Peck, we did have to take some loans from the county's reserve fund to.
Was that like pre-2000?
No, that was 2017, 2018.
Right. Okay. And we had a conversation, as I recall at that time, about this reserve and the need to have more on hand for cash flow, right?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Just checking to see if our memories mesh. I've got other questions, but I'll defer. I suspect Commissioner Didier has some questions as well.
Okay.
No, actually, Matt, you've done a very good job presenting this, and my only thought is if those funds were available, more of this work would have been done on a timely basis, correct?
Certainly, we canceled a lot of work that was originally scheduled, like chip seal. We did no chip seal this year other than contracted work with the city of I think it was Washtenaw and Connell. So those two were the only chip seal that we did. We cut our own because we just didn't have the resources available to do it. And a lot of that this year had to do with COVID-19. Our receipts for, gas tax revenue were down quite a bit. Fortunately, not as much as they originally anticipated, but still it's a pretty large impact for us.
And I noticed that the new pavement on Ione is already starting to ripple because the thickness is not there for the truck traffic that it's having on it.
Yeah, correct. And any new roads that we do, typically we get in there after we put the first two shots of BST on there, we come in that very next year and we'll put a third shot on. So yeah, we didn't get that this year. So we'll have to do a little extra work to get it prepared for us to chip seal it that third time.
So Matt, question for you. We're kind of blending two issues here, it sounds like. One is beginning fund balance, which is a cash flow need, and the other is your overall budget and projects that you've been able to accomplish. Would it be fair to say that the road shift is what largely has been responsible for the reduced amount of work that you've been able to do, and that the beginning fund balance is a symptom, but the real problem is the shifting to current expense?
That is a correct assessment, yes.
Okay. What else would you show us out of here? What else would you highlight? Maybe the STP?
Yeah, the main thing is if you notice there in the revenues going down to the federal grants specifically, and I believe in your budget, it might show TAP, STPR, HSIP, I believe, and all the way down to the Rural Arterial Program, RAP. That's the funding, that both the federal and state funding that we got for projects, meaning we were awarded projects. The board submitted grant applications. We were awarded those projects, and that represents that money. And that totals up there to $4,786,700. Like I said, and the county's match on those projects is $857,000 and some change. So we're at a point now where, we've gone out and we got lucky. It surprised us. We got 3 bridges funded in this last call for bridges, which is unprecedented. But I think it also kind of shows the shape of our bridges, because those are considered structurally deficient and need to be repaired. And of course, through the STP program that we still call it, we've got some necessary projects funded. And the tough thing is now is with the federal government, they're putting tight deadlines on when we have to get funds obligated, which means we have to get through phases and get the different phases obligated in a specific timeline. So we can't just push off projects and say, well, we won't do them this year because we can't afford the match. Let's put them on next year. If we do that, then we'll have local programs with the Washington State Department of Transportation, and then of course the feds through FHWA saying that we need to return that money. And that would be a sad state if we get to that point.
So Matt, doesn't that really speak to prioritization? And we've got a historical pattern of how we prioritize our spending. And when there's matches involved, that elevates the significance of those projects for the reason you just cited, which is we don't want to lose those funds.
Correct.
So it is, it's not untrue that we put those monies at risk by not having match dollars available. But it is also true that by adjusting priorities, we can reduce that risk. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Road shift is a big chunk of change. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I would ask you to be thinking if we should elect not to take a road shift. As one of the more senior leaders in the county across our departments, I'll be looking in the future for your thoughts on where we would cut the kind of money out of the current expense budget that would be necessary to avoid a road shift. I'm happy to spend money on roads. That's what the road tax is for. It's what the gas tax is for, even though many counties do a shift and it's a lawful activity. It's not one that any of us enjoy, but in the interest of transparency, we also have to look at the other side and say, okay, what's the impact on the rest of the budget? So again, I'm not putting you on the spot now. I'm not looking for an answer now. I'm just asking you to be thinking about that going forward, because I think that conversation is coming, and it behooves all of us to have it in mind, what we would cut to make that possible.
Well, Commissioner Peck, of course, I'm advocating for the county road fund and county roads in general. But I think we've been able to illustrate in the past that when that levy shift and the diversion for traffic policing, which now we just do it through a levy shift, which I appreciate, that to me is the best way to do it. That when it was more like about 1 million, 1.1 million, we were through that process. We were able to still be able to do all of the necessary work. So I'm not saying that the levy shifts aren't necessary. They are. That's why the legislature believes that, has made them absolutely lawful. And I'm not advocating necessarily against those, because I do care for the whole county as well. What I'm asking is that we look and try to limit the amount of that levy shift as much as possible. And I know how we all budget. We all underestimate revenues and overestimate expenditures to some degree or another. And I'm just one of those guys that reviews all of our financials and all of that. And I think that's pretty evident that all of us do it. And the question is how much is really necessary to make sure that all of us are healthy. I would suggest that I think it's closer to $1 million levy shift as opposed to a $1.7 million levy shift, based on what I'm seeing here in my numbers. So that's all I'm saying.
You're kind of trying to answer the question I said I wasn't going to put to you now. So
yeah.
I don't want to keep you from expressing your opinion, but I think this is a much bigger issue. I will just say, though, that I wish it weren't necessary at all to shift any funds. And I believe if the state legislature was following the Constitution and not putting unfunded mandates on counties, that it wouldn't be necessary to do any shifts. And that's what State Association of Counties have been working so hard on the last year or so, actually for several years, but especially this last year with the lawsuit over the ballot box expenses. So I get some traction there and get the state to pay their obligations. And just so that I have expressed to the State Association of Counties and the Legislative Steering Committee in particular that a day is coming when many of us, myself included, will be advocating for our counties to stop doing work that has been mandated by the legislature without the requisite funding to go with it, and instead fund our own local roads and programs. We've tried just about every other mechanism up to and including litigation. If this doesn't fix it, then the next step is going to be to just say we're not going to do these things and see what that happens. So I don't want to get too far away from the budget, but those all have direct budget implications. Keith, back to you, please.
Okay, thank you. Matt, do you want to go on to motor vehicle and miscellaneous funds? Unless there were other questions. Yeah, go ahead.
The motor vehicle fund, as the board knows, is an internal services fund. It's not designed to make money or to lose money. And so what we do with that every year is we using basically past years and some future analysis, we try to estimate what work will be going on out of that shop, what expenses it will occur, and what revenues it will get in the form of payments for services and through its rental services through ER&R. So with that, it also is the inventory spot for the county road department. So when you see those areas where we're getting revenues for rock and gravel and sand, that is typically 100% sales of products that are stockpiled in an inventory that are sold to the county road department. It's kind of an interesting thing, but the county road department is not set up to maintain inventories because county road departments are designed to charge costs directly to an activity and further down to the road level. And the motor vehicle department is designed to maintain inventories. And I will assure this board that we are doing 1,000 times better job keeping track of inventory than what has happened in the past. And I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, so I won't go into further detail. So we work with the county road department to understand what products they're gonna need, so that the motor vehicle will purchase those and have those on hand and then sell them. And so when you look at the beginning fund balances, you see the non-spendable fund balance beginning 184,000. That represents our inventory on hand, which is also in our shop within the parts room. It also represents the other inventories like rock, sand, gravel, guardrail, posts, all of the miscellaneous things that the road department would use. So other than that, like I said, going down farther.
And Matt, before you go down further,
Yeah.
let's back up to the equipment vehicle rental short term.
Okay.
$1.7 million there. And I fully recognize that sometimes it makes more sense to rent a piece of equipment than to buy it, store it, maintain it, etc. But could you just give us a quick snapshot of what kinds of equipment that we're renting on short term that's $1.7 million a year?
Matt, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I don't know how that happened. I must have accidentally touched it. Sorry. The short term in this definition, as it pertains to the BARS manual, represents those vehicles and equipment that are rented on an hourly or daily basis. Right. And those represent, all of those exist within those that are rented by the county road department. So that would be their trucks, any of their pickups, of course, their motor graders, our heavy duty dump trucks, and of course the trailers that they haul. So we are getting more to the point that some of our specialty equipment we don't utilize all the time, that we're actually renting those directly as opposed to owning those in the ER&R and then renting those out, because that would be more expensive. not only to the motor vehicle department, but to the renting agency, in most cases the county road department. And that allows the county road department to incur those expenses directly as they rent them. So what you're seeing there is really the fleet of trucks, dump trucks, motor graders that are run on a daily basis by the road crew.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. And that's really kind of what I wanted to talk about there. The long term is more where we are talking about monthly. That's when you charge your rent based on monthly charges or annual charges. And that is more what we do, like with the planning and building department with their vehicles. And of course, Commissioner Cook is currently has a ER&R vehicle that we charge a monthly rental rate on that as well. So that's what those represent. And of course, I do want to say the short term is really what we're doing is we're really, I don't want to say guesstimating, because a lot of analysis and calculation goes into this, but we are theoretically estimating how many hours each piece of equipment or vehicle is going to be rented. So that number isn't an exact number, where the long term certainly is an exact number. So yeah, that's the difference there. If something happens where, like we've have had, where we've had certain events like the winter, certainly we were using equipment more so than what we anticipated in some cases, and you might see revenue being a little bit higher. But on other years where we're maybe having to cut certain activities, you might see that number go down. So we're using a lot of data from past years and going into the workload going into the next year on what we would see in revenue. And that certainly can have a huge effect on the motor vehicle department, because they're still maintaining and could still be spending money but not receiving revenue. So this is a fund that, of its very nature, is one that we spend a lot of time managing on a daily basis in a lot of different ways. So, but yes.
If I might ask you, on the hourly rental rate, I'm taking it for granted that you keep the piece of equipment or the truck in your possession, but on the hourly rate, they're reading the hour meter to charge you, or is it by the hour that you have it in possession?
Well, for us, and for a county road department, and this is something we've discussed before, is time cards are everything. Our staff is required to document not only their time, what activity and what road they worked on, but they also have to document the equipment that they used and any of the materials that they used. So we track the hours from their time cards, and then we do some validation of that through as you know, on the heavy equipment we have, there are hour meters on there. So, and then of course fuel consumption and all of that. So we do try to make sure everything makes sense. So we don't advocate for our people to write eight hours down on a piece of equipment that they, a whole day of using a piece of equipment if they only used it for a couple hours, let's say. So we want that. We're out for accuracy as they document their time, and then we pull that from time cards.
And then the equipment rental place, they work with you obviously on that. Is there a predetermined amount of hours that they're going to hit us with at the beginning of the rental that we have to abide to in order to have the piece of equipment, or is it just off of the hours ran?
Well, for us, that would be probably more specifically with leased equipment. We do have leased equipment. Motor graders are a great example of that. The lease agreements themselves are really predicated on us not going over 5,000 hours. So on a piece of equipment for them to take back, that's where they're going to get the most value. And of course, we don't have to pay any additional above the lease to compensate that. Very similar to if you are leasing a vehicle, there's usually mileage. And in this case, there's hours on the bigger piece of equipment. Those are the only ones that we lease as our motor graders and our loaders, our loaders and a piece of equipment like that. And we charge, the rent is based on collecting really the lease payments annually and of course maintaining those hours. And our usage is pretty good. We don't typically go above those hours. 1,000 hours on a motor grader a year is pretty standard, so we feel pretty comfortable with those terms.
Is there a minimum that they will charge you if you don't reach?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just for clarification for the record, there's lease equipment that you lease from outside the county, and then there's rental equipment that is owned by the county that you're renting out to various departments and activities, and how you track that time varies by the nature of the use, whether it's a specialized piece of equipment or maybe just a pickup. You don't need to respond unless I got any of that wrong. Otherwise, we can move on.
Yeah, no, you're correct.
Keith?
Yeah, Matt, anything in the 153s to 159s that we need to know about?
No, the only thing I would do on the 153 is to just remind the board that there's a statutory responsibility that a certain amount of the motor vehicle fuel tax goes to special paths and trails. If you do not spend that money in any given year, there's a calculation based on the amount of motor vehicle fuel tax that you get, that you need to deposit that in a separate fund that can be used at a later date specifically for special purpose paths and trails. We do that on an annual basis. And, we do have projects this is special paths and trails is an area that, I think we need to have some further conversations with the board on maybe some, of course we have ideas on where we can spend that. And this isn't just building bike paths adjacent to the road. This is separated paths and trails. And so, this is an area where we're doing our statutory responsibility when we're not spending them during the year as part of our capital improvement budget in the motor vehicle fund, which is the 595 portion of the county road fund. We do the calculation and deposit that amount at the end of every year into this fund. And then we, like I said, we'll be having these discussions with the board on maybe some of our ideas on where this money can be spent. One area that we are looking at spending some of this money, of course, is in Basin City with phase 2. We've already done quite a bit of work there on R170 for the children that cross the road there to go to the school, and looking at a separated path, enhancing that separated path there for the kids. I'm an advocate for sidewalks are necessary, but if we can have a point where we're not intermixing vehicular traffic with pedestrians, moving pedestrians farther away, I'm always for that. And so that's what we're looking there. Yes.
There is a tendency for people who maybe don't have a lot of years of looking at the sometimes crazy language in these budgets. There's a tendency to see this paths and trails and think it's like, a walking or hiking trail up Badger Mountain or something. So I appreciate you bringing out that example in Basin City. I think that is the kind of activity that fits under paths and trails. And I just want to highlight the fact that paths and trails can mean a lot of things. And in our case, I've seen you using it mostly for pedestrian safety uses, and I think that's great. Thanks.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
And Matt, on that aspect of that, Road 100, where it crosses I-82, is that county? That is county. That's not city, correct?
That is city, but it doesn't mean that the county can't work with the city on specific projects.
We need a walkway for those kids there's schools on both sides of that roadway, and even my son and a lot of people are saying somebody's going to get killed on that crossing there with these exits from the highway, entrances to the highway, with those kids crossing that I-82 highway over that overpass.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say is because this is motor vehicle fuel tax and this is collected for Franklin County, it can only be utilized in the unincorporated area. But I will tell you, Commissioner Didier, that another area, and like I said, I think there's room for a lot of in-depth conversation with the board in the near future, is looking at the Burns Road, Kohler, Road 100 area, on creating some special purpose paths there as well that will connect those people in that area to the Broadmoor area. And so we are looking at a lot of these areas to enhance safety. And as I said before, I'm an advocate for having separated paths for bicycles and pedestrians. And we've, even in constructing those roads, and we've taken that into consideration and have adequate room to do that, as opposed to just the normal sidewalks right adjacent to. So yeah, I'm looking forward to bringing some options to the board and getting some direction on how they would like to see us spending this money, because I will tell you, we do need to start spending some of it. There is a timeline on spending it. Once it goes in, you have approximately 10 years to spend the money. And so we've been doing this, and we're getting to a point now where we need to start spending some of this money. So, would you like to
These are relatively small dollars for the kind of projects you're talking about. These, I'm sure, are eligible as match money for grants. Are you pursuing these as match money for grants?
I want to be perfectly frank with you, Commissioner Peck. We do want to go after grant money, and some of the grant money that we're looking at is TIB, which is the Transportation Improvement Board, which is another state agency. We want to, which is funneling, of course, federal dollars, but it's urban in nature. But we have to have a comprehensive plan that is in compliance, and due to us waiting on the city to get their work done, we're not in compliance, and it has certainly impacted our ability to get grant funds or go after grant funds. Rural funds are not available on some of these projects like RAP, and certainly we could go after some of the urban funds to do some of these through STP, and have done so. But TIB to me would be the most effective because we're not looking at just putting in special purpose paths. We're looking at doing some widening of roads and some intersection improvements out in specifically some of these areas. So, so this would be match money, and along with county road dollars to get some of these projects done.
One more thing, Matt, is over there on Taylor Flats Road, Douglas Fruit. Have you done any work on that, getting that? I've talked to the owner of that land, and he's willing to work with us on an easement for a curved truck exit there onto Dent to get down to Road 100 to get on the highway. Have we done any work there? Because the truck traffic on Glade is getting extremely intense.
Well, on Taylor Flats, is that what you meant? Because I agree on both of them, but Taylor Flats, the traffic, Glade North, right outside of city of Pasco, heading north, right there by what is now Lamb Weston, that used to be the highest average daily traffic that we had in the county for a section of road. That has absolutely shifted to Taylor Flats, and we're going to be reaching the 10,000 vehicles a day, which is going to be the first time the county has had a road other than state highways going through the county that are reaching that level. So I totally agree with you. We're going after funding. We're looking at different funding sources for that because it's definitely a vital project. We've seen it. It's been on our 6-year transportation improvement program for quite a long time to do that intersection. So now it's just trying to get the funds to do it. And initially we're looking at what we call planning funds, which will be enough funds for us to move forward with all of the necessary work, which the board is 100% involved in that. So, yep.
And that is including a sort of a takeoff there off of the southbound lane on Taylor Flats to get onto Dent Road for long trucks and trailers?
It would be that whole area, yes.
Yeah, if we had that gentle curve there through that triangle piece, it would enable those trucks, because now they have to make a more than a 90-degree bend to get onto Dent Road.
Yes, yeah, and we would be looking at that complete area.
Okay, Matt, that's good discussion. Let's move on to the other miscellaneous accounts. I think the next one is it the 156?
Yes, that's the County Road Mitigation Fund. That, just real quickly, that is where we deposit the funds that are collected. Those were mitigation funds that were decided as part of the rezones in those specific areas, and that money is really to go towards enhancements to the roads itself. And what I was talking about earlier, this money would be used as ultimately, when we get to that point, would be used as match for completing projects that are specifically associated with the rezone, which has added traffic to county roads. So as we collect money through our approach permit process, it gets deposited here now.
Okay. And your 168,
the 168 fund is a second quarter excise tax, second quarter of a percent excise tax that the board adopted through ordinance back in 2009. This money specifically goes towards really what the RCWs define as transportation type capital improvements. It can also go towards parks. And this has really been a godsend for us because this has been a pretty healthy thing, and we are utilizing this really as some of our match for these county road projects that we're doing with federal funds, and using it in accordance not only with state law but with the ordinance that the board passed. So this has been a really, like I said, a godsend for us. In the past, we've somewhat left it alone, but this has really helped us, especially in recent last year or two, in trying to, keep the county road fund somewhat healthy by using these funds appropriately for capital improvements to transportation facilities. So,
okay, any questions on any of the public works accounts? We're scheduled to run with you, Matt, till 10, but we're trying to get a little bit ahead of schedule here this morning.
Yes, I understand there's a board meeting this morning with the County Road Administration Board. So
there is pretty important issues for Franklin County, for all the counties.
Yes.
All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, Matt, thanks very much for meeting with us this morning. I'm sure some people are going to have some questions, and they can, of course, follow up with you individually. Karen, I understand you're getting some feedback on my account. I don't know where it's coming from. If you'd like, I can log off and log back in during this quick break, or are we doing okay now?
I think we're okay if I modulate the volume on the local switch. So everybody's a little bit distant from their microphone, and some are closer. So but I think we can make it work. I think we're ready to move on to. Go ahead. I think you're fine.
I was just going to say, can we move right on to the HAPO Center?
Yes, Tom French. Thank you, Matt. Tom is on and ready to go with the HAPO Center.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Commissioners.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Go ahead, Tom.
Good morning, Tom. We're in tab 30. And whenever you're ready, Tom, go ahead.
Well, the budget that I submitted for 2020 is pretty straightforward, as all my budgets are. There have been a few changes internally here at the Halpo Center that I can speak to, but all in all, what we have is, with COVID and the unknowns around that, 2020 is what it is. But interestingly enough, 2021 promoters and people wanting to put on dinners and social events, they're very optimistic. Our calendar for next year, if we can get past the COVID restrictions, could be a year that we'd probably have to mark it up to a one-off year, but it could be a very beneficial year for us. We have a lot of events that would have been happening in the fourth quarter of this year that the promoters have asked us to move to the first and to the early part of the second quarter of next year, which would essentially put them hosting those events twice in the same calendar year, to try to capture what they missed in 2020, but then still have their later 2021 event. RV sales, we have booked with two very large companies, multiple full facility RV events. So you'll notice that our revenue in the 2021 budget looks solid and looks strong. So we have some optimism. It's obviously, with COVID restrictions, there are still a lot of unknowns. Our wages have been reduced. The budget that you guys have in front of you, I do not know if it totally reflects that. Those two positions were left in the budget. One of them being a facilities hourly employee. I truly believe we can accomplish what we need to accomplish with the staff we currently have on hand. But that position was left in the budget in the case that I needed to fill that, not anticipating to do that.
Okay, Tom. Well, to say that this has been a wild year for people in the event center business would be a real understatement, and probably hit your organization as hard as any. I do think that the steps that you took with getting out of the restaurant kitchen staffing business and going with catering probably helped. And running things as lean as you can and cutting back when you don't have events. All those things contribute. Appreciate those efforts and recognize it's just a really tough year. Keith, question for you. Are there CARES Act funds that are dedicated for government costs, meaning we wouldn't be taking money from local businesses, that Halpo Center might be eligible for to help offset any losses this year?
Yes, we've been already billing to our CARES Act grant from the Department of Commerce for those costs that have been associated with operating the testing site at the Halpo Center, as well as a number of incidental costs from the staff and the center itself to keep it operational or secure. There's fundamental costs, just fixed costs associated with owning the facility that we have to incur, and where it's eligible to be reimbursed from our CARES Act funding, we're submitting those costs and getting reimbursed for those. I will say, though, that does not negate the reality of the struggle that we've had. Obviously the Halpo Center is a multi-million-dollar operation, and it's by no means out of the woods in the sense of the shutdown. It's very dependent, as you described, very dependent on being able to host events at the facility in order for it to be sustainable. And so we're very concerned about it, but we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're maximizing those state and federal revenues to offset the cost of the county.
Yeah, I'll just add that Tom's efforts getting the arena to solid surface has resulted in a significant increase in the number of bookings, and together with what I've already mentioned, the closing of the kitchen and going to a contract caterer, all those things had us on a very positive track. And then COVID hit. So I think we're still a year or two out from finding out if collectively those things make it a socially and fiscally viable operation long term.
Yeah, Tom's done a great job of managing costs and reducing our fixed expenditures related to that. And had we not been in that position going into this year, it would have been a lot worse. So I think we need to recognize that.
Okay. If there are any questions on this section, we can certainly come back to them, but let's go ahead and move to the 450, the RV park, since they're together here.
Yeah, Commissioner Peck, if you don't mind, I'll just briefly remark on the RV park. We do have some management changes going on out there, but we have reviewed the submitted budget. There's not a lot of material changes from 2020 for 21. We do see a slight increase in our cell tower leases. One of the cell tower owners, lessors, has been trying to renegotiate that bid. We work with a consultant, and they have recommended that we not accept the proposed changes, which would have reduced our income on that cell tower. So they're under a long-term contract. It goes up a little bit each year, so we anticipate that will continue. On the particularly the operating issue, you remember last year we've had some discussion about moving from a park-based electrical bill to individual meters at the stations. As we continue to roll that out, we're slowly transferring that cost to on a per kilowatt basis used by each individual tenant, and they're paying their individual electrical bills. So we're seeing that that takes a couple of years to implement, but we're seeing some improvement there. COVID obviously was an issue for us to deal with this year. You recall that we are trying to get out of the mobile home park model that has existed for some time at the park and occurred over a long period of time, and reverting that to a truly an RV park basis under the state law, working closely with the prosecuting attorney's office to make sure that we're handling the legal requirements. The governor's orders to prohibit evictions for lease-related issues has been a bit challenging for us, but we're working through those issues, and we're now, by being in phase 2, allowed to open up for weekend and short-term guests to come in. And so even though we saw a little bit of a decrease in revenue, we expect that to pick back up. So as I said, overall, the budget does not change materially from 2020 to 2021. And I think with plans that we've got in place, we're pretty well positioned to go forward into the next year. Certainly answer any questions that you may have.
Just one thought, which is, I'm going to assume you are, and if you're not, please consider referring anyone who's resident there and having difficulty making their rent payments to the various CARES Act programs for rental assistance. I'm assuming you're probably already doing that, but just in case, I thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So far, all of our tenants have been paying on time, and we do not have a delinquency rate out there at the park, but we'll point them in that direction if it's necessary.
Good. All right. Our last agenda item this morning is review of miscellaneous funds or any postponements if necessary. Anything, Keith, that you want to walk us through on that?
I
or
think
do you want to bump that till Commissioner Cook is back. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm looking to Tom and Tim to see if there's anything material that we've missed on in terms of kind of a preliminary look at the current expense budget. Most of the miscellaneous budgets, if we have not talked about them, are outside of dependent revenues, and so I think we're pretty well where we need to be for purposes of the budget hearings at this point.
Okay, any questions from anyone on anything related to specifically the budget? And we'll pause for a moment, and then if we don't hear any, we'll go ahead and recess until tomorrow's meeting, which is scheduled for what time, Keith? Do we start same time?
Well,
9 a.m.?
that's a good question, Commissioner. We're scheduled to have time from 9 to 11:30. We've just blocked that time out in case there were additional questions or discussion items. From my perspective, I don't think it's necessary that we reconvene in the morning. Certainly glad to if the commissioners want to discuss items in the budget that we've had hearings on all week. As you noted, Commissioner Cook will not be back until Monday. So my preference, I guess, would be that if we need to reconvene, that review period, that we wait until he's available. But we certainly will do whatever the will of the commissioners is.
Okay, well, I would prefer any kind of review to have all the commissioners here. Commissioner Didier, do you concur with that? That if we need to do this review, we do it on Monday instead of tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Well, not hearing any other questions then, last call before we recess till Monday. And Monday will be a to be determined as needed, and Keith, you'll let us know if in fact there is. Yeah, and it occurs to me that if we don't end up having one on Monday, then we will have recessed this meeting into Neverland. So I'll go ahead and close this out as soon as I'm sure there aren't any other questions. And then if we need one Monday, we can start a new workshop for that one day.
That
Okay,
works?
well, not hearing any other questions then. Keith, did you have something? You good?
No, I said that works. I would just express appreciation not only to the commissioners for listening to all of these agency and department budgets. This is tedious work, we recognize, but also extend our appreciation to each department head for the work that they've had to put together the budget and analysis that they've done in preparing that helped us stay on time, actually be quite a bit ahead of schedule, and extend my appreciation to Tom and Tim from the auditor's office for their staff work and helping put together the details. So with that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll just echo those thanks, and especially Tom and Tim. Great job, great books, easy to follow. Appreciate their help. All right, well, with that, then we'll go ahead and adjourn this workshop. What is the time here? 9:58 on Thursday, the 28th of October. And Keith, we'll look to you for any notices on Monday if we need to have another follow-up. We are officially adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.